Hello, everyone! It is Tuesday, and that means it is time to talk about comic books that are dropping tomorrow. Maybe some that drop today. I am your host, Aaron, and with me is Dan.
Dan,
And it's
man.
good to have you guys here to talk about comic books. What do we got this week?
Well,
Let's do it.
you know, I like to always start every week
With a
off with some
facsimile?
facsimiles, and DC did not let me down this week. They put out 2 facsimiles.
Look at that facsimile.
So this is
That's very facsimile-like.
All-Star Comics number 3 from 1940.
Okay.
This is the first appearance of the Justice Society of America.
Wow.
Before there was the Avengers,
Uh-huh.
before there was the Justice League,
Yes.
there was the Justice Society, which
Wow.
was made up of a team of characters,
Mhm.
superheroes at
Mhm.
the time.
Sure.
Like at the time, characters like Batman and Superman were so
Yeah.
popular that they could just be in their own books.
Yeah.
But all these characters, they kind of just pulled them
They
together.
kinda sucked on their own. They are not interesting on
They
their
did.
own.
They did good, but they can.
But as a
Maybe,
group.
maybe together they'll do better.
Yeah.
So I love these facsimiles. Of course, DC just kills it with the quality. I think
Yeah.
they're really good. And this was I think what's neat about this issue, All Star Comics, is it is a full issue of the Justice Society. It's not like a 8-page story and then like a 10-page random detective story and then a 10-page talking animals. This is just full on. If you like superheroes,
Yeah.
They made this just for all the people that like superheroes because they were becoming quite the. I mean, this is 1940. This is still pretty early.
Mhm.
Superman started in 38. Batman was 39. So it just every year it just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Other facsimile worth talking about: Wonder Woman #1. Like most Silver Age characters, Wonder Woman appeared in just a comics anthology series called Sensational Comics.
Mhm.
And,
Sensational.
yeah, they were very sensational.
Very sensational.
And she was eventually, like Batman and Superman before her, she was so popular that they gave her own book. I believe this is from 1942 when it came out, and it's just all Wonder Woman all the time. And I love Golden Age Wonder Woman.
Yeah.
It's such a
Why do you
weird.
love Golden Age Wonder Woman
So
much?
it's such a unique book.
Uh-huh.
It really is I don't mean for it to sound like a cliche.
Yeah.
But it is kind of novel that the superhero is a woman, and they get a lot of mileage out of that. Where I think because we talked about the Green Lantern, Alan Scott Green Lantern series, and how that's an interesting setting for that character in 1940. Much more interesting than it is in the present day. And so Wonder Woman kind of has that similar vibe where it's all the other superhero characters kind of have a sameness to them. They're just muscle guys that beat up criminals and they intimidate them. And Wonder Woman does at least have that angle where everybody's like, "Oh, you're a woman. What can you do?" And then she beats them up, she beats them up just the same way any other superhero would.
Right.
So it is really simple. Don't get me wrong. And we're not talking about a very complex character, but it is just that little extra layer where they do interesting things with it. Guys are always trying to flirt with her, and the angle of her coming from Themyscira, that is all in the original version.
Yeah.
And so she is kind of a fish out of water. So there's multiple layers where it's number one, she's a woman, so everybody has certain expectations of the way she should be, and number two, she's not even familiar with American culture or society at all. So the movies, the more recent movies do, I think, draw on a lot of the stuff that's in the original Golden Age stuff. And I think that's what I like most about reading the Golden Age stuff is when you see how much of it really is this has been a part of the character from the beginning, and you can kind of see where the more modern versions, they're just drawing from it. So she's you can see why she was so popular when she came out. She's a really great character. Yeah. So yeah, if you're interested in that type of stuff, like the history, the JSA comic that this other facsimile here, DC is obviously putting this out because they're kind of going in on the 1940s versions of some of their characters.
Yeah.
Like we talked about that Green Lantern and Sandman. There's also a Golden Age Flash book. So it almost feels like they're doing. I don't know if this is what they are doing because I really don't follow DC their editorial plans at all. But it feels very much like how Marvel's movies went in the 2010s when they were forming like they did their Cap movie, their Thor movie,
Sure.
and then eventually they do their Avengers. It kind of feels like they're doing that. DC's doing that, but for their old characters, where they're like, let's reintroduce
okay.
Green Lantern and let's reintroduce
So
Golden Age
something
Flash,
new might come out,
and
that
then
draws
maybe they'll
on that old material.
yeah, put them together in like a new Justice Society book that's set in the 40s. That's kind of neat. Like it feels like they're building an extended universe kind of from the ground up, which is very different for DC Comics, which has been very like bloated, top down. Like we own a million bazillion characters, so just find somebody to use in some way.
Yeah.
Whereas this feels very like stripped down and story oriented. So I'm kind of
That's cool.
they got my interest with that. But you know,
Got your attention.
yeah. So another book I just want to make mention of. This is not the type of book I normally talk about.
Right.
The Mandalorian and
That's a
Child.
surprise.
This is a book for little kids,
Yeah.
and it is charming. And I'm
It
saying
is
that
charming.
it is charming. I
Aw.
love. So this is by a cartoonist, Jeffrey Brown. I
Yeah.
love his work. He's a great cartoonist. He's done a lot of stuff, like ranging from like autobio stuff about his life and like a more adult oriented stuff. But he also has this really like fun. I don't want to call it childish, but his childlike. His art is very childlike.
Right,
Like it
yeah.
looks like stuff that a kid drew
Like
in his
a
notebook.
doodle. Yeah,
But,
yeah.
But it's the type of thing where if you don't know anything about art, you'd be like, this looks like a kid drew it. But then when you compare actual kid drawings to this, it's like,
Sure.
oh, this is a professional artist. Like, but he does have a very like childlike style to him, and he draws these Star Wars books. He did a series that was like Darth Vader as the dad to like little kid Luke and Leia.
Yeah, I think
and
I've
they're
seen
like
that
getting
one.
into shenanigans, and it's sort of like it's like slice of life humor but it's just kind of funny because the setting is Darth Vader and like baby Luke and Leia.
Yeah.
And this is kind of the same thing. It's Mandalorian with Grogu, so it's kind of just like slice of life stories about Mandalorian trying to be a dad to Grogu. It's charming, and I say that as somebody who doesn't have any huge investment in current Star Wars stuff. But you know, I'm what a lot of people might refer to as a hater.
You gotta get that
But
dig in there.
I'm just trying to get my perspective known. Like I ain't no shill for Disney, but I love Jeffrey Brown, and you can't go wrong with his work.
There
So
you
that's
go.
something I recommend.
There we go.
Another book going in a totally opposite direction, and this might be a book on the surface you might think it's not the type of book I would normally talk about. But I actually read this book several years ago when it came out, and I really, really liked it. So I was pleased to see that they did a new printing of it. This is a nice deluxe hardcover edition of a very famous, well, somewhat famous Japanese manga called My Lesbian Experience with Loneliness by Nagata Kabi. And this is an autobiographical comic, or manga, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
And it's just about her life growing up, dealing with loneliness and anxiety and her various neuroses and discovering her sexuality. And it is, I think there's a quote on the back here from, and it's attributed to NPR, but it actually is the most succinct quote I've seen. It's both deeply specific and universal.
Wow. Okay.
And I think that's what I like about autobiographical books, is because I don't know how else to describe it other than just there's something that you can only get from something that's real, where you see something like this book where it's very personal and it's a very unique experience. First of all, she's Japanese, and so there is a little bit of a culture shock, slightly, between America and Japan. Like in Japan, generals are actually much more harshly defined than they are in America.
Yeah.
So that manifests itself in ways that would seem similar to a lot of Americans, but still kind of uniquely Japanese.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's still a human experience that I think everybody can relate to in some way, just with various things about themselves. So I really like this book. If you haven't read it, I recommend it. If you like autobio stuff, if you like stuff that's I think they recommend this to older teens because it's definitely a
right. That's the age they were when they were kind of going through that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this is a deluxe reprint. It has like a new chapter in it that I think is more like an afterword of like how her life has been
how
since the book
things have
came
been
out.
going. Yeah, that's cool. And
I think she's done some other books. I haven't actually read them.
Yeah.
I always meant to. Like, I need to read more of her stuff, and I just never got around to it. But I did read this one, and it's really, really good.
I like the idea that, like, it's if it's an autobiographical work and they're relating an experience that happened to them, that there's about a million other people who've had that same experience that
Yes.
maybe felt like it was unique to them, and so they felt more alone or more
Mhm.
like something is weird with me or whatever. But when you're able to read that and see other people experience it, and then just be honest about that experience, I
Yeah.
mean that's a big deal.
And
So,
that's-
great book.
That's also really, believe it or not, a lot of people might not totally understand this, but it can be a very difficult thing to do when you're writing, to be,
Oh, to be
like
that
really
honest?
open
Yeah,
and honest.
yeah,
It is
yeah, for sure.
I've written a lot of stuff, and it is not easy to just be super honest. That's why I think what makes like a good autobio so powerful, like when you get somebody that can be really true
Yeah.
to themselves and their experience, because a lot of creators, I think, can sometimes hide behind fiction, where it's like, oh, I'm gonna put myself into my work, but it's all kind of nebulous. Like this part of it's really real, and this part of it was just created for the the drama,
Yeah.
and you can kind of twist and turn things, and then you get into this weird fiction world where it's like you question people's motives for why things are in a certain book. But when you have just an autobio book, it I don't know. Like I said, it's an experience you get from no other book because it's just real. Like
Yeah.
it feels so much more real.
Yeah.
So this is a great book. I really do recommend it. It's also the kind of book I think a lot of people probably just aren't interested in because they don't.
Sure.
They don't. It's a very. I don't want to say it's a niche subject because I do think that it can be interesting to read.
Perspectives.
The
of people that
perspective,
are going
exactly.
through that, yeah.
That's why I initially wanted to read it
Mhm.
purely for the other perspective. I was like, my thought was just like, wow, Japan. I don't know a lot about Japan, but that has to be different
Yeah,
than
much
what people are
different.
dealing with in America, and
Yeah.
it kind of is like just her dealing with her depression and like her family and not being able to get a job. And it's a really good book. I don't have much else to say
Yeah.
other than like I
Good
really
book.
recommend it.
Read it.
Read it. All right. Next up is a book that I could probably spend the rest of the day talking about. But
What is this?
Oh,
book?
that's my wife Jessica. She got here late. I don't understand why she's late because she works from home now. So I don't mean to put you on blast on stream, but come on,
Wow.
like. So this book is called my lesbian experience with
Long
loneliness. Yeah, she's already gone. It's on my bookshelf at home. She could probably find it if she wanted to read it before I get home.
Boom.
Boom. Oh my gosh.
Nice.
So next up, this
up.
book. I've
What
been
do we
wanting
got?
to read this book for so long. I've been waiting for it. It actually came out a few weeks ago, and I'm not naming any names, but we didn't get it in until today. And the reason was I raised my voice and was like, hey, where's this book? We're supposed to get this. And then things finally got moving and we got this book. So boom, let's talk about I Am Stan,
I Am
the graphic
Stan.
biography of the legendary Stan Lee.
Uh-huh,
This is by
uh-huh.
Tom Scioli. He is a cartoonist that I really like. I can't remember if we talked about his biography of Jack Kirby.
I feel like we have.
So I've certainly talked about it a lot with customers whenever they come in. These two books complement each other perfectly.
Yeah.
The Jack Kirby book came out a few years ago, and it's a really great look into the life of Jack Kirby. The Stan Lee book is all similar. It's a little bit of a different creative approach to it, but it is a very comprehensive look at Stan Lee's life. I would say the difference between the two, the Jack Kirby book is very personal, as in it's told in the first person, because everything in that book he took from first person accounts from interviews that Jack Kirby gave.
Oh wow.
So
okay.
he kind of did it in as if Jack Kirby was telling the story. The Stan Lee book, it's kind of ironic that he didn't go in that route, because I don't know if there's another creator on the planet that has talked about himself as much as Stan Lee has.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And he could have just got that information
Right,
really
right.
easy.
But that's also that's kind of the double-edged sword of Stan Lee is also known for being the biggest, if we want to be kind, we'll say maybe the biggest exaggerator when it comes to
What?
reliving history.
No way.
And other people will just straight up call him a liar. He's self-aggrandizing, to be sure. So I think with the Stan Lee book, Scioli tries to take a more neutral tone where there's no narration to it. It's all just. I think that's what I like about it, is that it's all just these scenes just presented very matter-of-factually, and it's all told through the dialogue. And in many ways, it feels like it's just kind of like clipping through moments of Stan Lee's life where you just get a window. Sometimes there's not even any connection from page to page, much less panel to panel. It's like, here's the thing that happened, here's the thing that happened, here's the thing that happened, but it all slowly goes through Stan's life from his very early age as a kid. You get a little bit of look into his family life, and then to him getting his job at his uncle's comic book publishing house,
Oh, that's nice.
Timely Comics, which would go on to become Marvel Comics. And it's it's really good. If you don't know anything about Stan Lee, I actually think this might be one of the best looks into his life.
You will know everything after you read this book.
Well, it's not just that, but like I made a reference to Stan Lee being a self-aggrandizing exaggerator.
Like 2 minutes ago.
Yeah, it wasn't that long ago. You might remember.
I said, well, in the past, I might have said it was literally 2 minutes ago.
So I'm doing my best Stan Lee impression right here. A documentary about him came out. I think it was even earlier this year. It was on Disney Plus, and it's very much like the Disney PR documentary about Stan Lee, where it's like in the 1960s, Stan Lee got a job at Marvel Comics, and he created all the characters that you know and love today, and there's just like no mention of the artist's name,
right?
And it's all like, and the reason for that partly is because that's how Stan presented it in the 60s, and there's a lot of complex reasons for the way it was, and I think the book does a good job of just presenting you with the scenes as they were related from various sources.
Sure.
But a lot of them, they're drawn some from Stan's own mouth, but also they are contrasted against other people's perception of the events. But so like one thing I've read through half the book today, and I was expecting.
Killed it.
Well, I think a lot of people. So I don't mean to like stir up controversy, but like it's a controversial subject when you talk about Stan Lee and Jack Kirby and how much like what role each creator had. There are people out there that absolutely loathe Stan Lee.
Wow.
And there are people that really dislike Kirby.
They think he took credit for all.
He took all the credit, and there's and part of that problem is that Stan, and I think a lot of the people that like Stan and really defend him, they go too far to overcredit him for things, and I fall somewhere in the middle when it comes to the Jack Kirby Stan Lee debate. That's like a timeless debate between nerds, where it's like, yeah, I think Stan Lee took a lot of credit for things that he didn't do, and I think he was unfair to a lot of collaborators he worked with, and I don't think he needed to go out of his way to proclaim himself to be this like brilliant writer and brilliant creator, but the biggest reason I think that is because the things that we know for sure that he did, which was operate as an editor and handpick excellent artists to work with and run the whole ship and create a new way that superhero comics were perceived, is enough to make him a legend.
That's pretty
good. The things that he actually did are really worth talking about.
Yeah, they're important things.
Like he really became a spokesman for comic books and ambassador for comic books as a whole. And part of that was because his entire life he wanted to just escape comics. Like he didn't like being a comic book creator. Well, like again, this might be hard for people to understand in this age of popular Disney media, but like I can go back to my own childhood as now as an old man, but back some decades ago, like comics were not cool. They weren't, and even in a professional sense, like working in the comic book industry was.
Also wasn't cool.
Was not cool.
It was
when you go back to
you couldn't hack it in the real publishing business. So if you're in the comic book,
exactly.
I get that vibe.
Says we're still that. Well, some of us maybe are a little cooler than others.
All right.
But yeah, and so that is something that's kind of on display in the book, and I think it's also important to understand the time in which it takes place. Like there's even there's a reference to Stan Lee and his wife try to adopt a child, and it's I think the 50s, and they're denied because they're an interracial marriage because he's white and his wife is Catholic. And they're just like, oh, that's an interracial marriage. Or I'm sorry, I said that right. Because he's Jewish. Stan Lee is Jewish, and she's Catholic. That was the joke. I was like,
what?
the way they reference it though, it's like racist and it's just between two religions, but they're like it's interracial.
Yeah, that's why.
And so it is. He definitely is a product of his time, but it's an interesting. I think it's a really good look at somebody who was highly ambitious. Like, there's no doubt about that. Like, he was so ambitious, and he kept trying to find ways to get out of comics, and nobody took him seriously. And then he would go on to be one of the most famous, not just publishers, but creators, just the famous figurehead of some of the most popular pieces of pop culture media of all time. It's a crazy. It's just wild that it happens like
man.
that. Yeah. So it is just fascinating to read this story, especially when it's not from
his perspective.
Yeah,
him telling the story.
where he's just like, yeah, I just sat down one day and I said, what if we do a...
I'll draw Spider-Man.
Yeah, exactly. I said to him, what about a guy who's a spider? And boom, I'm a genius, you know, and it...
Perfect.
This book does a better job of kind of breaking down, like, all the ingredients that go into play, but still highlighting his strengths. And
Nice.
so it's a really good book. I highly
That's a good
recommend
book.
it. All right, let's move on to some books that...
what do we got? What do we got?
You know, there's not too many of the single issues that are coming out this week
Yeah.
that I have much to talk about. We're going to kind of go through some of the stuff that's in my poll.
In your pool,
My poll, I've been talking about this Birds of Prey book every time it comes out.
That's your new favorite.
You know what? It really might be, and I only say that just as having a mild level of shock about it, because it's not the type of book I would normally read, because it has Harley Quinn in it.
Right.
But it's
It's
really
not your jam.
It's not my favorite, but it's a great book. I mean, Kelly Thompson is a great writer, of course, but Leonardo Romero is just killing it on the art, and I love this cover too. This is like perfectly framed. Yeah. This sets up the showdown between the Birds of Prey and Wonder Woman, and you have her in the foreground with the whip and Canary just perfectly framed in there. Like, it's a really beautiful cover.
Yeah, it's like pre-aged.
Yes, yeah, it makes it. I love the style.
Weathering. It's got weathering
on it. Yeah, his whole art style. Just, I think this is something I have said before, but I really like it because it looks like it's a comic book, and that's something that's very important to me. Like, I like books that look like they're comic books, and books that are not books that look like they're trying to be something else. Like, you will see comic books that look like they're trying to be movie storyboards, for example.
They're trying to be like a whole feature film.
Yeah, and like this just feels very much like a comic book. I love the art.
Good vibes.
It's a lot of good action to it. There's some good humor in it, but it sets up issue 4. Looks like it's going to be pretty good. Like, as you can see, Wonder Woman's on the cover, and this is the tease to what's going to happen in issue 4. I'm looking forward to it. This is possibly my new favorite monthly book.
It's a surprise.
Yeah, did not expect it.
There you go. We like surprises around here.
Yeah. You know what? It is fun to be surprised.
Subverting expectations.
And that's why I like to try new things, because I like to be surprised. And it doesn't happen all the time, because I'm certainly somebody who has my tastes, and you know, I like everybody else will like to just revert back to the things I know I like.
Yeah, sure.
But it is really good to just get something. And
it's like finding new music.
It's exactly, yeah. And then I just go all in and listen to nothing but the new thing for like a month or so.
Thompson is great.
Yeah, Kelly Thompson is great. So Shazam, I've been following this one.
Shazam!
This is, you know, I wasn't sure that Mark Waid would be able to keep this story going, like, with an irreverent tone.
Keep you engaged.
It's pretty silly. I like Mark Waid a lot. There's an ad for Birds of Prey right there.
Hey, look at that. Full circle.
He keeps the silliness going, but he kind of keeps teasing that there's something else going on. I'm not even really going to talk about too much of what it is. Just, there's some stuff with the Shazam origin, and then there's a nice final page twist that sets up an interesting dynamic that's, it's a good like new angle to take on Shazam, which is not necessarily something that I think is needed, but it feels correct in the context of like how Shazam works. So I'm eager to see where it goes.
Okay.
I have, of course, been enjoying these variant covers by one of my favorite artists, Chris Samnee.
You do love a variant cover.
You know what? I'm known for my love of variant covers, if I'm known for anything.
You're always talking about it. You're like, you know what I love? It's the best thing that happened to comic books was variant covers. And
Yeah,
I'm like,
absolutely.
Right. Absolutely.
Except for the one Susie draws. That was... Now we just got to sit here and wait. Oh, there it is.
There we go.
That's what we were waiting for. Okay. Issue number 2 of Army of Darkness Forever. I really... Do you remember me talking about the first issue of this, Dan?
I think I recall.
It was only a month ago, 30 days ago.
Well,
we talk about a lot of stuff.
I'm an old man and I have terrible memory.
I I really like this comic. It's written by Tony Fleeks, who is a really good creator. He's like co-writer and artist on one of my other favorite books coming out right now, Local Man.
Local Man, yeah.
And he's killing it on this Army of Darkness comic. I, of course, am getting the variant cover drawn by Tony Fleeks himself, not the regular series artist. But I think when I talked about the first issue,
Good variants.
it was all, the whole
It was a
issue was
setup.
just setups.
Yeah, it's
And
kind of
I'm
like
like,
gave
ah.
us the old story and then brought
Yeah,
us up
like
to
half
speed.
of the issue is just kind of recapping what
Yeah,
happened in Army
yeah.
of Darkness, which I feel is fair because it does a really good job of merging the two alternate endings for Army of Darkness. There's a theatrical ending where he just wakes up back in the present day and then he fights more Deadites, and then there's the original ending which got cut where he wakes up in the far future of 2093
Yeah.
and it's like a post-apocalyptic zone. And Tony Fleeks is doing an excellent job of merging it all together into one good story that
Yeah.
feels like this feels like the actual official sequel to Army
Yeah.
of Darkness. Like
What it should
there
be.
was what it should be, exactly. There was always talk of doing an Army of Darkness 2, and it never materialized, and I don't know if it ever will. Like Bruce Campbell's never going to play Ash again. He said that before, and then he came back to do the show, but I think it's probably more true now than it's ever been because he is just old, very old, and Ash is a very physical character. I don't think he can physically handle all the like falling down and, punching himself in the face.
We're all getting old.
Yeah, it happens
It's
to the
all
best
good.
of us. But also, I think that like the rights to Evil Dead, like I think they want to just kind of expand away from the character of Ash and make it just get back to its horror roots of just being a horror comic or a horror movie franchise, I should say. Like I don't know if you've seen any of the new, like they've done 2 new Evil Dead.
Isn't there like
movies.
a series too that came out recently? Or maybe I'm thinking.
No, you're thinking of Ash vs. Evil Dead.
That's what I'm thinking of.
That was the series,
Yeah.
and that was kind of the last hurrah for Ash and Bruce Campbell.
That's what I'm thinking of.
And so I'm really happy with this comic because it feels like the sequel to Army of Darkness that we're never going to get. And I've talked before that I'm really iffy about licensed comic book work because sometimes it just feels like just cheap work for hire.
Some randos.
You know the name is recognizable, so I'm going to pay for the license and then just hire a bunch
and
of
try to make
randos.
money off of it. Yeah.
Exactly. But this is like solid. Like you can tell this is something that Tony Fleeks has been brewing, and it's a really good idea for Army of Darkness and Evil Dead. If you like that kind of stuff, but maybe you don't read all of the comics because they put out a lot of Army of Darkness comics and Evil Dead comics, and I don't like most of them. I really love this one. This one is good.
Nice.
All right, talking about licensed properties that I didn't think I was going to love, but I do
Yeah,
love.
Transformers.
Transformers, also issue number 2.
Yeah.
Man, this comic
Look
is
at that
just...
variant cover though.
No, this is the main cover.
Oh,
I'm
man.
sorry. Nice try, Dan. This comic is just so... I think I said this last time when I talked about the first issue, but it is so like perfectly all ages hardcore. Like it
All
doesn't.
ages hardcore.
That's my new.
That's a term I've not heard before.
I'm coining that genre right now. It is all ages hardcore.
All ages hardcore.
This is something for kids.
So I remember when I sat down and invented all
Yeah,
ages
exactly.
hardcore.
That's gonna be my legacy. All ages hardcore.
I'm into it.
Like,
I'm
it's-
confused, but into it.
It doesn't feel like it's talking down to kids, and it does show like some like little stuff on the edge, like this opening scene right here. Optimus Prime accidentally kills a deer. He steps on it.
Oops.
And it's like it's a really tender moment though, because it kind of shows Optimus Prime as a character, like why he's a good guy. He cares about life, and it's also him getting acclimated to this planet. Because as we saw in the previous issue, they just woke up and they don't even
Yeah.
know where they are, and all of a sudden they're in this war with Decepticons. And there's a lot of good, like not just backstory, but kind of fleshing out the Transformers story.
Yeah.
I think that's what I said the last time. I was never really a Transformers kid because it just didn't make sense to me. Like, you know, I get it. They're like in disguise, but why? You know, like they're big robots.
They
I
could
guess.
just do whatever they
Yeah,
wanted to.
yeah, exactly. And there's a little bit
I
of
wasn't a Transformers kid because the toys were too expensive.
well, that was ultimately the biggest reason. I mean, maybe if I would have cried and begged, I would have gotten some.
Yeah.
But no, I had.
Crying and begging didn't
I
work
had.
in my house.
Yeah, well, I respect that.
Still doesn't.
I had maybe like 5 Transformers and I had 500 GI Joes. Like, yeah. And, well, my Transformers were hand-me-downs from my cousin.
Wow.
Yeah, they
You get
were
money bags. over
Yeah,
there.
like, five whole Transformers.
5 whole Transformers.
But no, this comic is really fun,
I
and
really the art seems
it
really
comes
fantastic.
and
as
that's
well.
what it's about. It's
Mhm.
it's by writer artist Daniel Warren Johnson, just
Mm-hmm.
the hottest guy in comics right now.
He's so
He's
hot.
so
right
hot
now.
right now. And
Well, that's just a 20-year-old reference now.
you know what? People get it. It's a meme. People like Ben Stiller and Will Ferrell.
So hot.
Hanzo.
Hans.
But no, this
What,
comic
you
is
messed up
just
to me
so
there.
much fun.
Yeah, it looks killer.
It looks great. It's action packed. Like I said, it's all ages hardcore. I don't think there's anything in here that's like too adult for kids. Like it is about giant robots fighting each other.
Yeah, yeah.
But
there's
it
gonna be
doesn't.
there's going to be some mayhem.
Right,
violence.
and like they do show characters getting killed,
Mhm.
but it's treated with the gravitas that is required. And
Mhm.
I think that was something that always differentiated the comic books versus the cartoons when
Mhm.
you talk about G.I. Joe and Transformers.
Yeah.
Like G.I. Joe, like in the comics, they were military.
No one ever
like,
got killed though.
not in the cartoon. In the
Oh,
comics, they did.
Oh,
like
okay,
like
yeah.
people would get
They were
killed.
just
But in the
mercilessly
cartoon, they were
destroying
all
each other.
yeah, exactly. In the cartoon, though, they were all just firing lasers and always missing.
Yeah,
you know, and,
or the ship would blow up and they would bail.
and you always see the parachute. You
Lame.
know? Yeah, but
Murder,
you know, I think the
war
other
crimes.
there was a nice little Easter egg in this issue too.
Yeah.
We've talked about how this launch at Image is Robert Kirkman's new.
Mhm.
What did he? I don't know.
Cyberverse,
Cyberverse. Yeah.
Cybertronoverse.
And so his book Void Rivals is in continuity with this Transformers book, which is also in continuity with G.I. Joe. And they're just slowly been
Mhm.
kind of teasing it. Issue 2
you
here.
think they'll fold in He-Man?
I don't think they have the rights to that. I think that's who owns
Is that a
He-Man?
separate one?
You know what? I honestly have no idea.
What else did Hasbro
Well,
have?
I mean, right now, Image doesn't have He-Man. It's at IDW, so they don't have the rights to that. But
I'd be in it.
you know what? That would be fascinating to see.
Orko pops up.
I want Wilder from the He-Man movie. Remember that little
Little dude,
weirdo?
the guy?
Because they couldn't.
That wasn't in the book. Or
That wasn't in the cartoon.
show, like-
Yeah.
Let's talk about that for a second. What's the most disappointing movie you've ever seen when you were a child? And why was it He-Man with Dolph Lundgren? Because it had nothing to do with the
I'm-
cartoon.
I'm not even exaggerating. He-Man was like the first movie I saw as a kid
Uh-huh.
where I was like, "This is weird. Like it's not it's not good, and I don't. It's not He-Man."
It's not-
And it was the first time I ever recognized something for ripping off Star Wars.
Right.
Like there were
Right.
lots of movies that were like Star Wars that I liked, but it didn't bother me.
Yeah.
But I saw this and I'm just like, why does it look like they're Star Wars?
Yeah.
It's
just
not
didn't
Star
make
Wars.
Any sense? Nothing.
Yeah.
But I'm going to say it did star a very young Robert Duncan McNeil,
Yeah,
who
that's
would
right.
go on to be on Star Trek
Mhm.
as my favorite pilot, Tom Paris.
And it also starred a very young Courtney Cox, who would
Mhm.
go on to be your favorite character
Be
in your
on-
favorite sitcom,
On
Friends.
Yeah, my favorite show. R.I.P. What's his name?
How
Jesus.
embarrassing. Chandler?
The guy that played Chandler. I'm so sorry.
Matthew Perry.
Matthew Perry.
R.I.P. Matthew Perry. But, you know, so talking about this being a shared universe with all these books, there was the Easter egg in Void Rivals
Mhm.
connecting it to Transformers, which that book takes place in far out space. So I'm like, okay, I can see how you could combine Transformers.
Yeah, Transformers
hang out in space all the time.
Yeah, like why wouldn't they?
How's G.I. Joe going to get into this?
Mm.
Well, in this book issue,
Uh-oh.
we get a little Easter egg where Starscream gets into a firefight with a military jet. It
Oh.
looks very familiar. They don't
goodness.
say what it is, but it's like if you were a G.I. Joe fan, you might recognize some of this military hardware. And then
Mhm.
the jet gets shot down. The pilot ejects, and it's like, oh, he's got this weird little jetpack thing. And I'm like, that. I was looking at that, and I'm like, wow, that looks like one of the G.I. Joe toys I had. Completely forgetting
that
this is supposed to actually be tied
Yeah,
together.
yeah, yeah.
And then this final panel right there is name patch Duke.
Dun, dun, dun,
Dun, dun, dun. So there's
Wah,
your
wah.
little
There's
connection.
your connection right
So G.I. Joe comes out soon, and I gotta admit, this is getting me a little hyped for it.
there. Are you excited?
I'm probably gonna I think I talked about issue 1 of Transformers.
Yeah.
I was gonna read it, but I prefer G.I. Joe. I'm so psyched about this Transformers
You're
comic
fully
right now.
invested now.
And now I'm even more psyched for G.I. Joe because I'm just
Sweet.
like, and they got some really great creators working on the books. We'll talk about it when we get to it, but Yeah. So man, this is some good stuff.
It's shaping up.
It just, and the biggest reason I have to like it is tailor made for a 40-something guy like me, because it just makes me feel like when I read comics
Makes you feel like a kid again.
back when I was a kid.
And isn't
yeah.
that the point of this whole situation that we're in right now?
Well, not always, but yes. Yeah. All right. So Transformers, if you haven't heard, if you should check it out. If you're just maybe interested in some like weird, cool action comic, you roll your eyes at Transformers because it's like a toy, thing.
Toy franchise.
You got to remember Daniel Warren Johnson, possibly the greatest comic book creator working today.
Wow.
So he definitely kills it on that book.
Okay.
All right. Let's talk about. This is like I didn't have too many new stuff to read this week.
The Punisher.
There's a new Punisher comic coming out tomorrow from Marvel Comics. I decided to give it a read, mostly because it's a new #1.
We love new
and
#1s.
I do have a soft spot for the Punisher.
It'd be worth something.
Yeah, that's what they
It's a
tell you.
#1.
That's why they do it.
Gotta have those #1s.
The Punisher is one of those characters that I really love the character probably more than I like. I don't know. I don't want to say the concept. Like, the concept is solid.
Yeah.
It's just the concept is so simple, you can only get so much mileage out of it, you know? So I feel like he's a character that doesn't necessarily need an ongoing series. And in the 90s, he had like 3 ongoing series. It was insane.
Yeah. There's a lot of Punisher.
There's
in the
so much
90s.
punishing going on in the
They're
90s.
punishing everybody.
When the Punisher comics are good, they're really good. They're so just over the top, like action, like ultimate tough guy, you know. But I do think that when he's a part of the greater Marvel universe, the Punisher works better as a character who just has cameos in other characters' books, because he really he like tests the idea of what a superhero is, because he is like
He's a vigilante.
He's the vigilante anti-hero. Like he's like almost the pinnacle of that. Like he's the guy who's like, he's not afraid to kill criminals. He's blowing away creeps left and right. They've wasted their life. They don't deserve it. And there's like a little bit of like there's a, what's the term I've heard, like a revenge porn aspect to it, where it's like Punisher works best when he's going up against just like the worst of the worst type of people, where it's like you really hate them and it triggers something deep in you, and you're just like, I want to see Punisher blow that guy away.
See that guy get killed.
Yeah, and that kind of makes the character a little bit of, I don't want to say really controversial, but it definitely forces people to kind of like confront some things in themselves,
What does this say about me?
Yeah, exactly. And that's why there's a lot of people that don't like him, because it's just like, well, he's either too extreme or just too simple in the approach. But I do think that there's like a rawness to the character that's why he's endured for as long as he has. And so Marvel's kind of been in this thing for the last couple of years where they don't really know what to do with the Punisher. They did a story arc last year. It was a 12-issue series written by Jason Aaron, where Punisher became the lead assassin of the Hand, which is a ninja guild that always fights with Daredevil.
Okay.
And I did not even read it because Jason Aaron is a great writer, and I'm sure it's fine, but I just really couldn't be bothered. I'm sorry. I like reading my 90s Punisher comics where he's just like blasting creeps and getting into gang wars and stuff. And the Garth Ennis series from the 2000s is one of the best dark comedy, violent comics ever made. So
what about this one?
So what about this one? Well, part of the reason I checked this out because, like I said, Marvel's kind of been in this thing where they're trying to do something new with the Punisher. Last year, they had him become, I don't know if he was brainwashed or like magically whatever, but he was the lead assassin for the Hand. I don't even know how it ended, but this new series starts with a new guy being the new Punisher. Even right on top, the man is different, the mission remains the same. And let's see, it's written by, I don't remember, I didn't recognize the creators that did this, and I can't find their credits immediately. It's fine, and you know what that means when I say that. So it's,
is this like in the future?
No, but so the character, he's like an assassin for S.H.I.E.L.D., or he's basically like your super secret CIA agent, who is not undercover, but so there's like an element of James Bond to this book, which I kind of appreciate.
Okay, interesting.
That it's sort of like James.
Different.
It's James Bond meets oh shoot, I forgot his name. Who was in the? Oh man,
We're having a moment.
I'm having a senior moment like crazy.
What movie?
It's Charles Bronson as
Death
James
Wish.
Bond. Yes, Death Wish.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of that. So he's a character who was
That's
like,
a 40-year-old reference, maybe even a 60-year-old
come on,
reference.
Charles Bronson
Charles
is timeless.
Bronson is, in Death Wish.
You know, but I mean, I think it's appropriate because Charles Bronson was very much kind of the template for the original Punisher, like
Oh,
the
sure, yeah.
the '70s hardcore. Him
Yeah.
and Clint Eastwood
Mhm.
as like the cops that aren't afraid to
Mhm.
break the law,
Yeah,
and you know,
yeah,
he's just
yeah.
gonna blow people
Or a
away.
guy that had something real bad happen to him, so now he just wants to go get
Go
criminals.
get crazy revenge on the
Mhm.
criminals.
Yeah.
As Charles Bronson, every movie, a new best friend that we've never seen shows up only to get murdered,
Yeah,
so
they
that
gotta
Charles
die.
Bronson can avenge him.
So he's got to be sad.
Yeah, but so that's kind of what's going on with this. That's the setup is like he's an ex-Shield guy.
Yeah.
His family gets murdered,
Again, yeah.
and but it's like the whole point is like he's undercover. Like nobody's supposed to know he works for Shield. So somebody out there knows his identity, and they're striking
Mm-hmm. And
at
they
him.
targeted
And they
him,
targeted
yeah.
him to kill his family.
Yeah.
And they also set it up so that he gets blamed for the murder.
Oh, geez.
So there's like a little bit of an A-team thing going on here,
Okay,
or like
yeah,
somebody
gotcha.
else. There's like that's another thing of like the man framed, falsely accused on the run.
Yeah, that's a whole deal. That's
so
a
there's-
common trope, as
There's
we say.
there's a lot of genre tropes going on in here, and
Oh,
so
yawn.
it's fine. Like as a setup, I didn't really get anything from the character. He just seems like such a bland character. Like,
Yeah.
which to be fair, I do have to be fair. The Punisher was pretty bland when he first showed up. Like in his first appearance in Spider-Man, he was kind of just like tough army guy.
Just a
you
dude
know?
that had a lot of
He's
guns.
just a dude that had
and wanted to
guns.
kill bad guys.
Yeah, and he developed over time into the character that he is. But I think one of the things
Oddly enough,
oh yes.
another Dolph Lundgren movie.
Oh yes, I was almost going to make that reference. Another bad Dolph Lundgren adaptation.
Right. So
Ugh.
I'm saying in the 80s and very early 90s, Dolph Lundgren didn't get very good work.
It was all downhill
Yeah,
after
it was
Rocky
after
3.
he did Rocky
uh,
4.
Oh my gosh. I'm sorry, I don't remember my Rockies. Is that the one with the robot in it?
Yeah. Paulie gets the robot
Yeah,
as his birthday present.
Yeah,
He reprograms it
for all of you
to be
Zoomers out
sexy.
there that don't have any idea what we're talking about, go watch the Rocky movies if you want to see the
I would
worst
say
robot
the
ever.
Rocky movies are pretty good movies if you like to be uplifted and you want to get hype about
Oh, yeah.
doing something with your life,
Excellent sports movies.
which is I'm not into that.
I don't like that myself.
I don't want to do anything with my life.
So one of the things I thought was kind of just blasé about this is that he like never sets out to be the new Punisher.
Mhm.
He just wears this type of body armor that has glowing panels on it,
Mhm.
and everybody's like, "Who are you supposed to be, the Punisher? It looks like a skull."
Mhm.
And so then it's like the media's reporting like, "Oh, a new Punisher's on the loose," and
So this is an accident?
it's an accident that it looks like a skull. And I know that's what I was like, eh. And part of that ties into Marvel's like not knowing what to do
Mhm.
because I don't want to get too far into like internet conspiracy stuff.
Oh, I do.
But well, there is like a whole thing about the Punisher skull logo being kind of co-opted.
yeah, it's been co-opted by law enforcement.
Exactly, which that's not necessarily a topic I have. We need to go into.
Squirming.
I know. Yeah, it's like, well, there's just, it's. I appreciate Marvel's position of like not, like how do we handle this?
Yeah, so they're just
and
not
their
using
solution is to not use it.
Okay, yeah.
Which is like okay, that's why when they last year with the Punisher, Frank Castle, who becomes the assassin, they changed the logo because he's like, I'm a new man, I have a new logo.
Sure.
And so this one is like. It's sort of
It's not a
looks
logo.
like a skull, but it's not a logo.
It's
so
his actual pouch for his
yeah, it's
magazines.
his magazines that look like the skull. I don't know.
It's kind of silly.
It all starts to feel like a weird workaround. I think I've talked about this before when we talk about it's hard to look at these licensed properties and not think creatively of like this is just something that somebody had to find a way to make it work. This is
Right.
not an idea anybody had where they're like, I got
No.
an idea for an ex-assassin who has to go on the run and his family gets murdered and he's got to find the person that murdered his family while also dodging the government that's after, you know, and it's like, this was like this was a bunch of boardroom suits sitting in a room going, how do we make the Punisher work with all of these other things going on?
The
Like,
other
how
elements,
do we,
yeah.
because we have to keep
But he's
publishing.
got to be different,
But he's got to be different, but
but not too different.
but we own the name, so we have to
We
have a
gotta
comic
make
out
Punisher,
there.
yeah, we gotta keep
You
making
have
it.
to make a Punisher comic. So it's not like it's bad or anything. I think it's as
Yeah.
good a job as you can get if you like that type of revenge action movie kind of
Yeah.
guy. The only thing I could think of was last week we talked about that Unnatural Order book, which is free, by the way. We still have copies.
Go get it.
It's a free number
come
one
here and
issue.
get it.
Come here and get it. We got it. I don't know if anybody else is giving it out free, but we are. And it was like the fantasy book. It was a fantasy setting. And it felt like the whole time I'm reading it, I'm like, this feels very standard fantasy.
And then there was a great
And
twist.
There has to be a big twist at the end.
Twist?
And there was. And I got the same feeling from this Punisher, where I'm like, this all feels like
Twist?
almost a parody of like an 80s action
like
movie.
it's so over the top.
Right.
that
There
it's
has
gotta
to
be
be
tongue-in-cheek. And
there's
then
got
a
to be
twist.
some kind of twist at the end, and there wasn't.
No twist.
No twist. So I was. It's
Sans twist.
if you like Punisher type comics, you'll probably enjoy this. But I don't have
It's-
much else to say
It's
about it.
Punisher adjacent, but not really the Punisher.
And that's I think a thing that's going to bother people because like it's not really the Punisher. Like it's a guy that has basically the same origin, kind of, but it's still not like Punisher. I don't know, Frank Castle. Like he just means something that he's the Punisher, you know. And so I don't know. This feels like knockoff Kmart Punisher. So good for Marvel for trying to figure that out.
Moving on.
All right, talking about more intellectual properties every week.
Yeah,
Dan,
baby.
I asked somebody to pick out a comic for me to read, and tomorrow Star Trek Picard's Academy #2 comes out.
Yeah.
We still had #1 on the shelf, so
Yeah.
I decided to go back and read both of them.
Yeah.
Now, Dan, you're a big Star Trek guy, correct?
Huge Star Trek.
So
yeah.
I also am a pretty big fan of Star Trek, but I will not proclaim to be an expert on Star Trek.
Okay.
But is Next Gen, like that era, kind of your favorite of Star Trek?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Like the series that came out like in the 90s. Yeah,
Mhm.
obviously, and very old.
Yes. So, do you like how many stories did they do about like Picard in his Academy days?
There is maybe 3 episodes.
Mhm.
Particularly, there's one that chronicles the time when he was stabbed through the heart. And
That's
had
my
to get
favorite
a new
one.
heart. Yeah,
Where
and
he plays Damjat.
He plays Damjat with those guys.
Yeah.
And they kill him, and then he gets to do it again, and he chooses a different route to not get into the fight. And it's very what's the movie? The black and white movie.
It's a Wonderful Life.
It's a Wonderful Life.
Because it's a Q episode too,
Mhm,
and that's actually one of my favorite episodes.
Yeah, it's a
of
great
Star
episode.
Trek. Yeah,
Yeah.
great Picard episode too. One of the things I liked about this comic is that Picard has hair.
Yep.
When he's in the Academy.
Yeah, and this is like a story about young Picard, right?
Yes. So I just wanted to point that out because there are sometimes, I forget which movie it is, where they show like pictures of young Picard
Mhm.
and they have him be bald, just
Yeah.
so you know that it's Picard you're looking at. You can't
Yeah.
just assume that when he was 20 years old he had hair. Why
Well,
would you
in
assume
Nemesis, they had
Shinzon,
Shinzon, who was a clone basically of
Yes.
him, and he was in his 20s.
and he was bald. Bald,
Why
exactly.
couldn't he have hair?
Why wouldn't he have hair? But anyway.
Anyway.
So I read this. I think you said something to me when you gave it to me. You said this doesn't look like the type of book you would normally read, and you are correct about that for multiple reasons. Number one, even though I just gushed about Transformers and the Army of Darkness
Yeah.
comic, I do have an aversion to kind of what I consider to be licensed work for hire stuff, which we talked about a little bit. And this book kind of feels like that to me. Although I do have a few thoughts on it, if you believe me.
What's the thoughts?
So-
I need to hear it.
So number one,
You gotta hit me with it.
I can't tell who this book is for.
Right. It seems like it's aimed at a younger audience.
Correct.
From my initial read.
So I went into it thinking like, oh, this is like Star Trek but like for kids, similar to. I had an example. Well, I mean, we talked about Transformers. Like that's definitely a book that's like for kids, but also for 40-year-old adults.
Hardcore all
And
ages.
and I think that this book, I couldn't get a handle on like what they were going for because the art looks very much like it's like a young adult kids book art. It's very colorful. Like the line work, it looks like animation art.
Yeah, it's more animated style.
And but there's like some weird stuff going on in the there's some language in it that I wouldn't normally see in a kid's book where I'm like I'm not like a prude or anything, But I'm like, oh, is this like not for kids? Like it just like
Yeah.
took me out of it because I was
Yeah.
like, I thought I was reading a kid's book.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, is this for like teenagers or
Yeah.
So I had a
Because
like,
the style of art doesn't necessarily match the tone of the story.
correct. That's exactly correct. But this is where we get into like my other further thoughts is like why I'm so disconnected from new Star Trek. Because like Fiona and Cake, correct. The new Fiona and Cake show is really, really good, and it does a good job of kind of matching the tone of Old Adventure Time while also being for adults. But it's not really for kids, so it's like really weird when you hear them say swear words. And
Yeah.
you're just like, oh, that's
Ooh,
weird.
yeah,
This was a kids cartoon.
It's for everybody that grew up with it, I guess.
Yeah, it is, and that's definitely what it's for. So this kind of has a similar thing to it, where I was just like, oh wait, this is like the art style looks so obviously for kids to me, or like at best I would say like young adult girl readers. Like it's very, I don't know. There's just the art is very soft and
Sure.
and cute. It's cute. I guess that's what I'm getting at. Like there's a cutesiness to it,
Okay.
and there is a cutesy joke.
You could be a guy and like cute.
You know what? I am a guy that likes cutesy jokes when they're good, and there is a good one here. I like that there's a good joke where Picard is fantasizing about
Oh, the hair.
the hair. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so there's a scene, if you want to show this page,
He's fantasizing
like,
about when he'll get out of school.
when he's going to be an awesome captain
He'll
and
be
get
a
out
captain.
of, and he's fantasizing about himself as an adult, and he's got this luscious flowing
That's what
hair.
he's gonna look like.
I got a chuckle out of that.
That's great.
I appreciated that.
That's a
Yeah.
great move.
But like tonally, it didn't really, like, it's not the type of tone that I really like in a book, and it's especially not the type of tone I like in Star Trek. But I can't deny that tonally, new Star Trek has kind of gone in this direction, where like everything's a little too cutesy. Like the characters are always like shooting one-liners at each other. Like they're quippy. Yeah, quippy. It's the Joss Whedon effect, and I don't like any of the new Star Trek shows. I'm sorry, I'm an old guy.
Not even Strange New Worlds.
I can't. I appreciate it's better than the other
there
ones.
was a musical version.
Now, see, that's you're not selling me on
about
it.
that?
No. That's not Star Trek
well,
for me.
well. Hello, Serena.
Ah.
It was really good.
I don't doubt that you liked it, Dan.
There is a lot of Star Trek I don't like. I'll say that. I'm not like
Lower Decks.
I didn't like Discovery. Lower Decks is fantastic, but you wouldn't like it.
So I haven't watched it, and that's because I think I wouldn't like it.
It's a love letter to Star Trek in of itself, but this probably has that same kind of vibe, I would guess.
Yeah, this does. It did make me think of Lower Decks, where I'm like, oh, they're trying to like go for that Lower Decks audience, which is not me. And there's also some weird like internal monologue thing going on. I can't tell what it is.
Like a narration.
Like a narration, and it's really like it feels very like teenage diary narration, where it's like every time they introduce a character, they have like Jean-Luc Picard, Starfleet Academy, second year, competitive athlete, nearly top of his class, bit of a know-it-all. Like little things like that for every character, and some of them I can't tell. I'm assuming it's presented as if it is Picard's internal monologue, but I'm guessing it's probably not. It's
just the story.
It's the story. I don't know. All I can say is, Dan, you should buy these comics.
I'm gonna buy them,
and I want you to read them, and we'll talk about them next week.
I'm gonna buy
and
them
you can give
because
them
I buy pretty much all the Star Trek comics, and I will say Star Trek comics is what got me collecting comics.
That's true.
Because I'm not a superhero guy, but I love Trek and I love Star Wars, and they were on the shelf.
And that is something that I like take great pains to kind of stress. Like while I'm talking about this, isn't something for me. I don't like it. I totally appreciate that there's stuff out there for lots of other people.
Right.
Like I'm not really protective of Star Trek. Like I'm a Marvel Comics guy through and through, and I'm barely reading any Marvel books right now. Like if they don't want to do books for me, that's fine. Do them for whoever's reading them. And so I mean this sincerely, Dan. I'm so excited that you have become kind of a comic book collector since working here.
Yeah,
and I can't
really
help
have.
but feel like I can take a little credit for that.
Well, the great thing is when customers come in and we're doing this stream and I'm learning about comic books and I'm learning about history of books and the writers, and people will talk about it, I can talk intelligently about a couple of things. You know, like,
just
oh,
get
yeah,
a few of those names.
So wrote
Yeah,
that, and
yeah.
oh yeah, well, did you know the first time this guy came out, he was in this book? And I'm like, really? And I'm like, yeah, he wasn't even the main character. I was blowing somebody away the other day about one of the characters that like wasn't the main guy, but then eventually becomes like a main guy, and I'm like, oh yeah, he was in Spider-Man or whatever,
Yeah,
his first
yeah.
appearance. And I'm like, oh really? I was telling everybody about Captain America when he becomes a werewolf.
Oh yeah, yeah. The
I was like,
werewolf
yeah,
cap.
that's from an old series, and they just sort of brought it back. They're like, really? I'm like, yeah, it was a whole story arc in a different book, and they're just sort of rebooting that whole thing, kind of an alternate universe situation. They're like, really? I was like, yeah, it was in the '90s. You should go check it out.
Man, this guy is an expert. Look at him. So let that be. I think that I'm gonna go a little Stan Lee on you. That's a testament to my greatness.
There you go.
That you can just spend an hour
That's
with
right.
me every week, and suddenly you're a comic book
He
expert.
sat down and made me into a comic
Yeah.
book expert. That's awesome. I was able to chat with a customer about the real reason why Lex hates Superman.
Yeah.
Perfect. And I reference that all the time. It's like, oh, did he catch your hair on fire?
That's
and now
my
you hate him?
favorite thing.
Yeah. You burned all your hair off, so you hate the guy?
Yeah.
That's
Yep.
legit.
Beautiful.
Well, we did it, man.
All right, that's all I got for
That's
today.
it. Awesome.
Yeah,
That was a lot of books.
There
I appreciate
was.
you reading Picard's
I-
Academy,
I did it for you,
even
Dan.
though it was probably a
It's-
miserable experience.
Nah, I wasn't.
But I
miserable.
aim to make everyone uncomfortable at some point in their lives. So
It's a skill you have. It's true.
I'm doing it. Hey, if you don't buy your comic books here at Fantasy Books and Games, buy them somewhere because there's something for everybody out there. You just got to go out there and look. A lot of cool stories. And we will see you next Tuesday for the comic book preview.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.